stimulus package, Councilman Garcetti was correct, they put back $2 billion. That may be more broadly available. And I'm certainly speaking, and I know many of others of you are as well, to give us more flexibility to actually help homeowners that are currently in homes. Because the regular CDBG rules do not permit it, the home rules do not permit it, and the first NSP program does not permit it. So we need the second bit of money to be more flexible to do that.
This city generates about $4 billion, and banks are holding our money. Banks are making money off our money. Yet these are the same banks who we are waiting for to bring down that principle because of the fact that everything's devalued, and we're waiting for them to decide when they will do that, when they make money off of our tax dollars as well.
Well, yes, that's true, but let me also say this. We're in a position that other cities would love to be in, right? If you would go into the Rust Belt of this country, there is absolutely no housing market at all, right? Their values have dropped in the area of 80%, completely wiped out. In Los Angeles, we have a housing market.
Thanking and supporting her colleagues, District 3 Councilmember Wendy Gruhl offers some advice and encouragement to homeowners.
A special plug to remind people that there are individuals out there who are trying to take advantage of you. Call the Neighborhood Legal Services, Beth Sedek, all the other programs that are out there, and the Housing Department. Many people who say, I can make your troubles go away and provide you a miracle, usually it's not true. And so we encourage you to call those who actually know how to handle this, but also not be afraid to call your bank. I went to an opening the other day where they were putting together a program where banks are saying they're having a hard time because people don't want to return their phone calls. There's nothing worse than being the recipient of a phone call that says you haven't paid your bill and just wanting to avoid it. Don't avoid it. Step up. There are programs out there that we can help work with you, and hopefully the City of Los Angeles additionally will use some of those dollars we have to be able to assist people who are facing foreclosure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, please open the roll then on the item. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
That is approved. Thank you all very much.
Continuing with the housing theme, item 9, a motion submitted by Councilmember Jose Huizar, suggests using current or future state and federal housing funds to assist low and moderate homeowners. Mr. Huizar explains some of the details of his motion.
What this motion does is ask that we start preparing a plan in the event that more federal money does come in, so that we do one of two things. One is possibly provide refinancing assistance up to $5,000 for low and moderate income families. And this is even more important because just today there was a newspaper article that says that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are raising their fees for people to refinance. So two things are happening opposite each other, where we're having more foreclosures. People would want to refinance but cannot come up with the fees, and Fannie Mae and Fannie Mac are raising their fees. So that's even more important that we help people refinance if they so choose. And secondly, to possibly create a soft second. And again, President Obama is expected to announce tomorrow more details on how he hopes, or how the country hopes, to help people who are in foreclosure. He's going to make that announcement in Phoenix tomorrow, one of the most hardest hit cities in the United States with this foreclosure issue. Thank you very much.
Seated again at the center table, General Manager of the Housing Department, Mercedes Marquez, answers questions from District 8 Councilmember Bernard Parks about government loans.
How do we go about, and I'm assuming you're talking about 108 loans and things of that nature, and others that we deal with, how do we go about changing or at least addressing or bringing that policy forward? Because if I understand it, many of the monies that we put forward to small businesses to help them get created are now suffering because they can't pay their loans back. So we have all that job creation that now falls on top of the issue of unemployment. And I'm just wondering, how do we get into the discussion about those types of federal or government loans?
My sense is that with the $2 billion that was included in the stimulus package, that is Neighborhood Stabilization Program 2. Right? That the language seems to be more broadly written to allow for some different things. I certainly expect, I can tell you, that I meet with a group of 5 housing directors for the 5 high-cost cities in the country. So the cities of New York, Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, and San Francisco work together on policies that very specifically affect high-cost markets. We have already taken up this question about what it is we should be recommending to the Housing and Urban Development Department in Washington about that money. How is it that it could be more broadly written to permit us, for instance, to do some of the things that are included in Councilman Weissau's motion. Right now, we could not use that dollars. So we would have to use CRA dollars, use other money. It would be an issue in the budget, frankly, to carve out the kind of money that could do that when federal dollars can't. The other dollars to be looked at, I think, are not traditionally looked at for this purpose. But the federal stimulus also has about $1.5 billion in ESG. That is usually used for homeless, but it seems to be a little bit more broadly written so that it may be used as homelessness prevention. So we may be able to take a look at that to help families that are in to keep them in. So we're going to be studying those very carefully. I can tell you that I am aggressively, along with these other cities, taking a look. We're planning to go in March as 5 cities to look at this. We're speaking already to Councilman Garcetti about this. We're speaking to the mayor's office about all moving together. I've also actually spoken with your staff as well as Councilwoman Perry's staff about this so that we take the right position to help us have some flexibility, because without it, we're just not going to be able to very effectively deal with the problem.
Home ownership used to be the American dream, according to District 7 Councilmember Richard Alarcon, who believes the problem is that we've allowed Los Angeles to become a rental city.
Members, I hope that we understand that we're sort of playing a game of musical chairs unless we deal with the root causes of the problem. I agree with Zumadag on the issue of foreclosures as a crisis. But long before there was a foreclosure crisis, there was a crisis in Los Angeles that we have allowed our city to become a rental city. The vast majority of people that live in Los Angeles do not own the home that they live in. And as a nation, we are doing the same thing. The crisis that emerged did not emerge because of the foreclosure problem. The crisis occurred because we have a failure of our working class community to have the ability, the assets, and the collateral to be able to generate consumerism. And unless Los Angeles targets as a goal to increase the proportion of home ownership, we're dancing at the party and the band is ready to leave. We are not going to be able to solve this problem unless we create more home ownership, unless we provide the opportunity for more people to have an asset that they can rely on, that they can collateralize and purchase other things. That's the way our society works. We are at a state where 70% of the people that live in a home in Los Angeles are not living in a home that they own. They have no collateral. They can't buy a car. They can't even buy a refrigerator. Yes, we have created this situation before the foreclosure crisis, but what is happening now is we are responding to the foreclosure crisis. We are not responding to the fundamental issues.
Let's go ahead and open the roll on this item. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
That is approved. Thank you.
And joining us now is District 14 Councilmember Jose Huizar. Mr. Huizar, welcome to Council Week in Review.
Thank you very much, Jack. Happy to be here.
Of course, we all know the housing market is in turmoil, not only in Los Angeles, but across the nation. And your motion on Tuesday consisted, as I understand it, of 2 parts: refinancing using state and federal funds and a mortgage assistance program. Will the President's stimulus package be of any help here in L.A.?
Well, not as currently designed. We are hoping that they earmark more of that money for preventing foreclosures. We know that the Treasury Department has received some money, and they intend to help homeowners who are losing their homes, to prevent them from losing homes. But right now what we see, a lot of the federal money, or a lot of the guidelines that direct the federal money, only help homeowners post-foreclosure. And what my motion intended to do was to say, hey, let's prevent people from losing their homes and not come in after the fact. And so that's why I suggest that any new money that comes to cities to help prevent, to help with the foreclosure problem, that $5,000 go to cover refinancing fees, because first of all, these folks who are losing their homes, they would love to refinance, get a lower interest rate, and be able to manage what they're paying monthly for their mortgage, but some of them can't even pay the fees associated with refinancing. And not to mention that just this week, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae actually are raising their fees. It comes into becomes more important.
Well, obviously, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are in big trouble as well.
Yes.
Of course, the Housing Department is due to report back in 30 days on how the program might work to actually help homeowners refinance. How do you see the program working, and who do you think would be eligible?
Well, anyone who is near to losing their home or would want to inquire about this, we would see if they qualify, obviously. But we got to remember that between January 2007 and June of 2008, there were about 10,400 multi- and single-family properties that were foreclosed. So we want to lower this number significantly. And what we see is hopefully the federal government and the federal money that comes in, we want to be prepared with a program that's in place. So when that money comes in, we have that program in place to do more pre-foreclosure efforts throughout the city of Los Angeles. And so it may be with covering the fees, it may be to give these homeowners a soft second, but it would really be or go towards those families who need the help. And we got to remember, we're not only doing this to help those individual families, but we're doing this to stabilize communities. It doesn't benefit anyone if we see more and more homes boarded up, because then that will start more deterioration in the community and lead to more crime, etc. This is about not only saving those families who are hurting, but also saving communities and stabilizing those communities where these homes are in.
When we hear about the federal stimulus package, they keep talking about shovel-ready projects. On the TALK program side that you're talking about mortgage assistance-ready programs.
Mortgage assistance-ready programs, yes. It's not the term of art that's now being used about shovel-ready projects. This is more those families who could step forward and show that there's a real need for them to get this assistance. And there's a lot of them out there. I mean, before it was just a few folks who couldn't afford to make their mortgage payment. But now you're seeing a lot more folks who have stable jobs, a decent pay, who are falling into this category.
Could you give us a little more detail on how this mortgage assistance program would actually work?
Sure. We would want to have anyone who could who needs assistance to once they qualify for refinancing, to be able to show that the current payment that they would make even after they refinance, that they perhaps would need a little help to continue making those payments monthly. And depending on the formulas that we come up with, we would provide an additional loan to these individuals so that they could make those monthly payments each month up to a certain time, so that after that time expires, hopefully these folks will be in better footing and the financial crisis has passed, and they would be able to not only hopefully provide for the full amount of the loan they have taken out, but start repaying back the loan to the city if they can at that time.
We've heard about reinvestment of local monies. We've heard about state monies, and you and I were just talking about federal funding as well. Is there currently funding available, or are we waiting for new monies to come in?
We're actually waiting for new monies to come in, because the little money that has been available from the federal government, like I said, that's been for post-foreclosure relief, and there's very little of it. For example, in my district in Boyle Heights, we are actually working with a group called East LA Community Corporation that's going into some of these homes that have been foreclosed, and they're working with the city to purchase these properties and rehabilitate them and get them back on the market so that we stabilize those neighborhoods. What we're looking at is to continue doing some of that, but get new funding, and the direction that is given by my motion is to tell our housing department, let's focus on pre-foreclosure, and let's get a program ready so that when the stimulus money comes in through the Treasury Department, we are ready to hit the ground running and start preventing families from losing their homes.
As you know, the council approved a pilot program for foreclosure prevention in District 7. Do you expect that program to eventually include other districts, and where would be the funding for this limited program coming from?
Well, it actually will help tremendously because we can learn a lot from that. Along with my motion, that same day in Council District 7, we passed a motion to use some Community Redevelopment Agency dollars. Now, again, these are local dollars, $1.5 million, to create a pilot project area where we could do a lot of what my motion is talking about, plus other items that could really stabilize that whole neighborhood. So this pilot project is actually a beginning. It's a good thing for us to do using local money. The local council member there actually wanted to, given the number of foreclosures that have hit that area hard, along with South Los Angeles is another area that's been hit quite hard. We wanted to do something immediately to prevent more homes from going into foreclosure. But then again, that's doing two things. One is it's using local money, and which we don't have a lot of to continue doing this type of work. But secondly, it does some of the pre-foreclosure items that my motion is talking about, such as covering the refinance fees, perhaps a soft second, plus other items that we could hopefully use in other parts of the city. And again, the areas that have been hard hit are the Pacoima area, the South Los Angeles area, and those are the two areas that have been hit the hardest with these foreclosures.
By the way, for people who don't know, could you explain briefly the soft second mortgage that you're talking about?
Yes, that would actually go towards helping those individuals who do not have additional funding to complete their monthly mortgage payment. And the soft seconds will help these individuals complete their monthly mortgage payment, and it will be a loan so that eventually these individuals get in better footing. They would be able to pay the city back with those additional dollars we have lent out.
You talked about the fees associated with the refinancing, and we know that there's been a so-called credit freeze around the country. But isn't it still possible to get no-fee, no-points loans in refinancing?
It is. It is possible to get additional benefits right now, but again, we're at record level low interest loans. But just covering some of these fees for the transactions themselves, even though you may get a good interest rate, or even there be no points, there are other costs associated that are not within the category when they advertise that there are no points that cost money to make these transactions possible. And these may cost anywhere from a couple of $1,000s to $6,000, $7,000, and so we're hoping that we are able to cover this and help people take advantage of lower interest rates if they refinance.
You better read it all before you sign.
Yes, and there's a lot of documents there too.
Yeah, I've seen them, yes.
They're hard to understand, and that's why the housing department's available right now. They're ready to not only help if people are close to being foreclosed, they should call the housing department, or even if they are refinancing, call the housing department, and we will get them some assistance to make sure that their refinancing is properly being done. Always, we got to watch out for people who try to take advantage of others in these needy times. And the housing department is here ready and willing to help those who just call and look us up on the internet to get that advice.
Good advice. What about first-time home buyers, finally? Is there any assistance or help for them?
Right now, there's always been first-time homebuyer assistance from our housing department. We, looking at the housing market, the crisis we are in, that help has always been there, but it seems like preventing foreclosures and helping those projects that are in trouble because of the economic downturn, that's kind of taken precedence over right now. But certainly the city council and the city of Los Angeles has a public policy goal of supporting tenants and supporting first-time homeowners and supporting those tenants to become the first-time homeowners, and that's always been a public policy goal of the city. It stabilizes neighborhoods, and that's what we want to see.
District 14 Councilmember Jose Huizar, as always, thank you for joining us on Council Week in Review.
Thank you so much, Jack.
And again, for information on housing, including buying programs, renting and renters' rights, and much more, go to the Los Angeles Housing Department's website at lahd.lacity.org. There's also a list of phone numbers that you can call depending on your housing situation and where you live. And you can get the specific number you need by simply dialing 311, your one call to City Hall. And we invite you to address the Los Angeles City Council on any item on the council agenda, as well as during public comment. You may come downtown to City Hall or go to the Van Nuys City Hall and participate via video teleconferencing. Remember, you can watch all Los Angeles City Council meetings live in their entirety on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, beginning at 10 a.m. On Sundays, you can watch the replay of all the week's meetings, also beginning at 10 a.m. Council Week in Review can be seen Monday through Friday at 9:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m., and on Sunday at 9:30 a.m. Well, that concludes our program for the week ending February 20th, 2009. On behalf of Michael Flynn and everyone here at Channel 35, I'm Jack Popejoy. Thank you for watching, and please join us for the next Council Week in Review.
LA City View Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
Kansas, and welcome to the City Council meeting for February 25th, 2009. We're here in the John Ferraro Council Chamber, room 340 of City Hall. We meet here every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m., except for the first Friday of the month, in which we try to get out to Van Nuys City Hall. Welcome to our guests who are here in council chambers, members of the public, and those viewers on Channel 35 who have joined us today through the city's cable system, which broadcasts each of these meetings live and rebroadcasts them in the evening time as well. We are also webcast live through our city's homepage at lacity.org, and we have archived video footage of our past council meetings there online as well. And you can sign up for podcasts or find out information about city departments and city services at lacity.org. You can always use your telephone as well to listen into our council meetings by calling Council Phone and listening in by calling 213-621-CITY. That's 213-621-CITY. So whether it's by computer, television, or telephone, there's a number of ways to catch our council meetings and to get back to the past council meetings as well. Our agendas are also available online or here in person or in the city clerk's office. Those are available 72 hours in advance or 24 hours in advance for our special agenda items. All of the agendas are split into items that have already had a public hearing and those that have not yet had a public hearing. A card from the public triggers a public hearing on any of those latter items, and you can also put cards in for items that have had previous public hearings, but that requires a council member to reopen it. We also have a section of the meeting for general public comment, and that is for items that are not on the agenda, but nevertheless under the jurisdiction of the City Council. So just fill out a card and hand it to one of the sergeants at arms. We'll be sure to get that in the mix today. I want to thank the council members who are here on time pursuant to council rules. That's council members Weezer, Labange, Parks, Perry, Rosendahl, Weiss, Wesson, and Zine. We're waiting one more council member. Ms. Gruhl is excused today, and Mr. Cardenas is excused to arrive at 11. That leaves Mr. Alarcon, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Reyes, and Mr. Smith, who we are waiting for. Again, that's Mr. Smith, Mr. Reyes, Mr. Alarcon, and Ms. Hahn. As soon as we have one more, we will begin the meeting. While we're waiting those late council members, we appreciate your patience, and we will begin shortly. Final quorum call for council members Alarcon, Hahn, and we have Mr. Smith. We have a quorum. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Gruhl, Hahn, Weezer, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weiss, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti. 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Okay, first order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
All right, Mr. Parks moves and Mr. Labange seconds. Without objection, those minutes will be approved. Next order of business.
Mandatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Smith moves with Mr. Rosendahl seconding. Without objection, those will be approved as well. We can run through the agenda, please.
Before beginning the regular agenda, Mr. President, there's a request to continue several of the items. Item number 11, there's a request to continue that matter to March 25th.
Okay, without objection, we'll continue item 11 till the 25th. Next item to continue.
Item 15, there's a request to continue that matter for 1 week, and that's March 4th.
Okay, without objection, we'll continue that till March 4th. That's item 15. Next item.
And also a request to continue item number 25 to March 11th.
Okay, we'll continue that. And also on item 9, if I could make a verbal amendment and refer that back to Plum, and that I hereby move, based on the advice of the city attorney, that council remand the matter to the planning department for revision of the mitigated negative declaration for the purpose of clarifying whether or not the project will result in impacts in the area of aesthetics, biological resources, and geology and soils, and for clarification of the mitigation measures proposed for any such impacts. Planning shall report back to the Plum Committee with the requested information and with a recommendation of whether the mitigated negative declaration as revised is sufficient or whether an environmental impact report is required. And if we can continue this item in council till the 3rd of April and refer to Plum in the interim. Okay? Without objection, we'll continue that as amended till the 4th. Other continuations, or should we take up the first items?
No, that was it for the continuations.
Okay. First items, let's hold all those until we have a 12th member. We're waiting for Mr. Alarcon and Ms. Hahn to constitute 12 members. That'll take us to the second batch.
Next items, Mr. President, are items for which public hearings have been held, items 7 through 22. Item number 7 is a confirmation of a commissioner. Do you wish to hold that on the
Yes,
desk?
please. Let's hold 7 on the desk.
That would leave 8 through 22 before council.
Mr. Zine.
Mr. President, please, 22, move the personnel report.
22?
Yes, sir.
You move which, the personnel report?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Mr. Reyes?
Thank you, Council President. Item 14, if we can continue that 1 week.
Okay, that would be 1 week. Will be till the 4th of March. Without objection, we'll continue
Thank
that. Okay. Mr. Parks?
Mr. President, I'd like to, on number 21, amend instruction 2, to just add the words in the second line, tractors and/or trailers.
Tractors and/or trailers.
Yes.
Any objection to tractors and/or trailers? Seeing none, we will amend that. Mr. Weezer is considering it, but we will note that for the record. And Mr. Labange?
Yeah, I wanted to call 21 special.
21 special
Yeah.
for Mr. Labange.
Right, and then also on number 11, we're going to continue it to March 25th.
Yes, we did that.
Members, just to let you know, school parks, very important issue, the relationship therein.
We've continued that one. Yes, Mr. Rosendahl. 18 from Mr. Rosendahl. Any other specials, colleagues? If not, let's go ahead and please open the roll on the balance, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. Next item, please.
Next items are items for which public hearings have not been held, items 23 through 30. 10 votes are required for consideration. Item number 23 is an ordinance. Do you wish to hold that on the desk?
Yes, please. And we have cards on 23, 24, 27, 28, and 29. That leaves us 26 and 30. Anybody wishing to call this special? Mr. Parks?
26, 27 for Mr. Cardenas.
Okay. That just leaves us with item 30. Anybody wishing to call 30 special? If not, let's go ahead and prepare the roll on 30 and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. That will take us back to our general public comment, which is for items not on the agenda, but nevertheless under the jurisdiction of the City Council. And our first speaker is Henry Kiefer. And after Mr. Kiefer is Dr. Clyde Williams. Good morning.
Good morning, council members. My name is Heinrich Kiefer. I reside
I always mess that up. I'm so sorry, Mr.
530
Kiefer.
North Avenue 53 in Highland Park. And I want to bring some public comment to you regarding Measure B. I'm curious as to how this ended up on the ballot, but nevertheless, there's some points I wanted to bring up. Multi-billion-dollar solar program, we've all heard about it, but again, there's no real plan for its accomplishment. The City Council hastily improved the Clean Energy, Green Energy, and Good Jobs program for the March 3rd ballot, again, with very little public input. The DWP Commission also didn't get a chance to weigh in on that. The plan is not fully developed. City Controller Laura Chick came out indicating that it had no plan, and she was not happy with the process. All of these things make for us as a government look bad. And I've spoken to the council before on integrity, on honesty, on trying to work together. And I guess maybe that day will never come here in America. I don't know how that goes, but it seems like generally everything's political, and it's really a shame. It's disheartening. We want the community to participate, neighborhood councils to participate. I'm a 5-year neighborhood council member, but yet it appears that it becomes just a political issue. The mayor wants to go from city council to mayor. Back when he was city council member, assembly member, I know the mayor well. He did my installation as chamber president in 1995. and on he went. And now we got the feeling, the community has the feeling that this is just another political ploy, joining with the unions to get the support for other offices down the road. Again, the PA consulting report calls the plan extremely risky. There was a letter that was withheld that identified it as risky, so I encourage a no vote, and please, I encourage more council members to stand up against Measure B. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kiefer. Dr. Clyde Williams is next, and then Chuck Tenon. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Clyde Williams. I live at 4115 Barrett Road in El Sereno, CD 14. I know the DWP's January approach. I know the Huron approach. I know the city controller's approach. City controllers, the PA consulting, is the better. The Huron approach is a big Monte Carlo game, but we don't know how the slots were set. Whoever prepared the PowerPoint for Huron doesn't know statistics, probability, or project feasibility, but they knew the expected cost before they started. A really sloppy job. The fact-based Huron report has no facts. They reference many reports, but those aren't available for the public. They confuse installation and location. They have a degradation factor, which is depreciation usually, and that's covered in another cost. So are they double counting? No information is given for the 12 uncertainty factors, whereas they give a normal curve distribution, but the factors aren't normal. These factors are badly skewed, as indicated by the difference between the midpoint and the actual, quotes, base case factors. Nothing is given to support any of their conclusions. And the hardware and installation costs, they give costs that are 4 to 7 times higher in the January report rather than in the February report. Garbage in, garbage out. Expected output was the basis for the base inputs. These are junk bonds, should be given a triple F rating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. Chuck Tenon is our next speaker, and then Zuma Dog.
Did you listen to...
Chuck, you're up.
Oh.
And then Zuma Dog.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, Chuck.
Good morning, Council President Garcetti and council members. City elections in 6 days. The mayor made promises that are not yet fulfilled to drive down crime and gang violence, to promote economic development in South L.A. in neglected, underserved communities that have the highest unemployment rates and poverty in the city. And most importantly, he promised more affordable housing, and yet it's less. Will he keep his promise? And Wendy Gruhl for controller, they say she can hit the ground running. They also say she can fly like an eagle, keep a faithful and watchful eye on waste, exactly where our money's going and how it's spent, and she keeps transportation moving. Her WMT program, it means Wendy manages transparency, which means accountability. In 2005, Laura Chick wrote checks for $165 million to the DOT for development funding projects. It's all gone. No one seems to know where it went. Accountability. And the Stop the Violence song, We Can All Live in Peace, Janice Hahn's song project to fund programs for kids. 3rd and 4th grade classes on a number of schools in the U.S. have done projects critiquing the words to the song and recorded it in one day, and they want to participate. And the Marine Life Protection Act, that is going to affect our $2.2 billion industry, will cost the local economy $100 million in losses, $20 million in city tax losses, jobs and businesses, and the port is going to get hit hard. And housing on Magnolia Boulevard, a 2-year development project, 2 buildings sitting there that looks terrible. They can't give it away. The banks don't want it. Maybe the city should take it over and add to the affordable housing by getting these 2 buildings. Or maybe they should have Herb Wesson's leadership help get it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Zuma Dog is our next speaker, then we'll go out to Van Nuys, and we'll hear from Rick Nightingale.
time in the city. This time, next week, Zuma Dog could be the next mayor of Los Angeles. Okay, there probably will have to be a runoff first, so it probably won't be for a couple months after that. But yes, it's been an overwhelming experience, and I would just like to let me say a little bit about what it could be like life as mayor with Zuma Dog. First of all, I talk about my 14-point plan because the first thing we must do is address the immeasurable waste that is robbing the coffers, and we're not able to accomplish anything. So you can make all these plans and dreams and goals, but if you don't have a plan, and I have the 14-point plan based on Dr. W. Edwards Deming, this is how we will achieve the goals. What would I do first day? Well, first of all, I would get all the commissioners and managers together and say, ding dong, the witch is dead. Because I'm here to say the problem with the city is not with the great managers and commissioners and workers, it's with the system itself. And that's because you have a vindictive, retaliatory, fear-based mayor whose entire goal is to just become governor and then president. Why would anyone vote for a mayor when he's immediately going to run for governor? So you have a guy here who's come here for 3 years, and you know what? Oh, well, what does he do for a living? How does he support himself? Who cares? I'm here every day, but more than any other council member, fighting out against the fraud, waste, and abuse. And so all that matters are the results. Imagine if I was actually mayor, what I would accomplish. They say I've already changed history in the First Amendment levels. They said you couldn't even record the meetings here when I came in. The Brown Act was being violated. You couldn't even walk in the front door at City Hall without being violated, and it's gone uphill from there. So if I get elected office, I'm not bringing the baggage of all the special interests, and I'm a career politician. I got to cover my tracks. It'd be Zuma Dog as mayor, and I'd be showing up here at public comment to get leverage over you guys, but I assure you you'd like it much more because I'll be working in the spirit of the community instead of a power struggle between council and the mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dog. Thank you. Rick Nightingale is our next speaker out in Van Nuys, and then we will hear from Arnold Sachs. I think you might have picked up a couple of votes there, Mr. Dog.
Yeah, Rick Nightingale. This is, excuse me, regarding what's going on in the city, that you people up there are supposed to be just like a judge and so forth. That you have obligations to the people regarding coming in here and making decisions. But it's like a minority type of situation. That a lot of the councils are afraid to turn around and go against it because you're called a racist or a bigot and so forth. This is your obligation to take care of this situation. That you don't make it, you're supposed to judge it, and make decisions like a judge and leave your emotions at home and so forth. But you don't. Some of the council brings in their parents and no problem, and say they're illegals when they came and now they got their papers and so forth. Great. And you're the second generation. Great. You got an education. Great. But the problem is, then when you turn around, how can you make the way you're doing it now, you don't make decisions regarding the law. Then the law is supposed to be with everybody, regarding the illegals and so forth. But no, it don't happen that way. We turn around, there's a vote taken, and you people ignore the vote because you don't want to go against your fellow comrades and be a bad person and be called a bigot and otherwise. But no, we got $5 billion going for illegals and so forth, and it could be any type of person for any part of the world. But no, you don't want to do it. You want to have a sanctuary city where everything is coming down to what it is. All these gangs that are taking over, well, who's all in jail? And they all cry what race and so forth's in jail. But no, you turn around, won't even kick them out of the country after they served their sentence. No, just let them go back out and cause more problems. Yeah, even look what happened in Washington, D.C. They found out an illegal turned around and killed that woman. And you see, everybody just thinks it's all right. You're there for the vote. Oh, well, we have to hold down for the illegals because they're going to help us vote. They're not even supposed to vote. They aren't citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nightingale. Arnold Sachs is our next speaker here, and after that is Chris Rowe.
Good morning, Arnold Sachs here. A little bit on Measure B again. Is it needed? Is it needed or isn't it needed? There's one article that was written recently that stated that Measure B, the area in Palmdale that DWP was negotiating for, would provide 33% of the electricity. Then recently, last weekend, there was an article written that the same land would provide 25% of the electricity for the solar paneling. And in the same article, the head of the DWP says that property isn't necessary for fulfilling the terms of Measure B. Still, if Los Angeles could place a solar farm in a high desert property, it would be like having the city's own power plant. Wouldn't that be unique? What's going on? And where's the voice from the council? Should we do it? Should we not? Why is on the agenda today an item that the city is negotiating with the DWP for rental property, to rent DWP property, but Measure B says DWP will own the infrastructure that is built on city property? Why aren't they paying a fee for it? It's so bad in so many different ways, and the city council, as usual, is leading from behind. I'd also like to point out that there's been discussions recently written that the mayor has was charged with leading the city's fight to approve Measure R. Measure R allocates $4.1 billion for the Red Line to go to the subway, for the subway to the sea, which won't even make it to the 405 freeway. There was an article in the LA Times recently discussing the surge, the infrastructure program presented by Obama. It stated that 3 projects built in the New Deal, LaGuardia Airport, Hoover Dam, and the Golden Gate Bridge, cost $3.1 billion in today's dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Thank you. Chris Rose, our next speaker.
Good morning, President Garcetti and members of the council. This morning I would like to talk about transparency. It is obvious because of how Measure B was handled in the City Council that there is not only a problem with this transparency within the City Council itself, but between the City Council, the LADWP, and the Neighborhood Council system. Yesterday there was a meeting posted for today on the Council Committee agenda for 4 p.m. for the Energy and Environmental Committee. Then it was posted, canceled. Those community members involved in Measure B had hoped that we would finally hear a presentation within this committee with the PA Consulting and possibly Huron. Why have we not had those meetings less than 1 week before the election? Finally, as I walked to City Council today, I looked at the skyline. What buildings are government buildings? Has the LADWP ever told the City Council what surface area would be required to implement 400 megawatts of solar in the city of Los Angeles? Has the LADWP identified which buildings could feasibly be used? Finally, I have sent several council members a letter addressed to Council Member Jan Perry. It is in reference to questions that were addressed at the Energy and Environmental Committee meeting on February 10th, 2009. I want everybody to understand that we all want solar. We just want to do it right. It has to do with what it's going to cost, what's feasible, what's the right technology, whether it's solar thermal in the middle of the desert or whatever it may be. And so there's so many issues here that we need to address. Yesterday I spent calling companies to find out whether it was feasible for me to put solar on my own home. And one of the estimates I got to put 100% solar was $106,000. So I want you to keep that in mind when you think about what it would cost to do residential solar. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Our next speaker is Isis, and then Mr. Anthony will follow.
Yeah, she's a radical.
Good morning.
We are on to you, Mayor Villangrosa, and we're gaining momentum. I say, do the ethical thing and step down, step aside, and spare yourself the inevitable. The inevitable recall that's going to hit you when you hit your next term. We Angelenos are fed up, and we are building up steam. Fellow Angelenos, a phantom mayor is not going to cut it. We say that the power that he beholds and takes advantage of is not the type of mayor that will serve well in this community of hardworking, decent, law-abiding, and for the most part, if they're not law-abiding, they deserve to be treated fairly, which the mayor has failed to do in terms of, say, the homelessness issue right now is in part a very sad issue and close to my heart because the homeless have been treated unfairly down and around here in downtown because they are homeless. They have been mistreated by the LA police at the hand of Chief Police Bratton, and that there's more to come on that. But however, trust me when I say that the way that the mayor does his shady business is not the caliber of mayor that we Angelenos need to be a role model for the youth to come. Because there is nothing but corruption through this administration. And be it that the CRA, the LA City Council, they want to throw a deaf ear, well, we're coming to get you.
Thank you, Isis. Our next speaker is Mr. Anthony.
Good morning, City Council. Yesterday I was connecting the dots on how the mayor is setting up his infrastructure with Measure R that gives council members 4 more years in office and the city charter reform which increases council member salaries automatically. He's 3/4 of the way there with people who will agree on everything he wants to do. Today, let's talk about transparency. The LA Weekly wrote in an article September 10th, 2008, describing the mayor as the 11% mayor or the do-nothing mayor. Read it for yourself. The rest of the time, he's either traveling or playing on our dime. Reminds you a lot of the vacations that President Bush took. By the way, the mayor was disgusted with the article. He sent his top PR person to have the paper retract the article. The paper said, no problem. Just tell us when we made our mistakes, we'll correct them and publish them. The mayor's top PR person couldn't find or dispute any of the article's facts. The paper's facts were verifiable as well as undeniable. Good job, LA Weekly. 3 months ago, December 2008, the mayor sent in his top crack staff of lawyers on our dime to sue the opponents who wrote the argument no on Measure B, the solar measure, again, trying to silence the voters' rights to have good information and to know the truth. Sounds like ex-President Bush again, doesn't it? But the judge threw out the mayor's crack staff of lawyers and sent them packing. Good job, Superior Court Judge David Yaffe. Here recently, we started hearing prominent leaders speak out on how good a job our mayor has done. Reminds me a lot of Michael Brown from Hurricane Katrina. Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job. How did that work out for you? Why are the mayor's TV ads filled with half-truths and half-lies? Why does he have to do that if he has nothing to hide? The last 8 years we've been lied to over and over again. Los Angelenos, aren't you tired of being lied to? We deserve better. This is not a private corporation or a private business. This is the people's house.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony. Appreciate your comments this morning. That will close our general public comment. If we can take up the specials that were laid on the table for 12 members, 1 through 6. Please, if we can open the roll, close the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Those are approved. Let's go ahead and take up our commissioner nomination next. And I'd like to recognize if Ms. Friedman would like to come forward to the table here. Thank you for your patience. And I'd like to recognize the chair of our Housing, Community, and Economic Development Committee, Mr. Wesson.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Earlier today, the committee had an opportunity to get to know Ms. Friedman, and she was very impressive. And I think for me, to have someone who already has, I believe, 9 years experience in this area, it gives us someone who can truly hit the ground running. There were no big concerns or questions in today's committee, so I would suggest that unanimously we confirm this appointment.
Thank you very much. Ms. Friedman, would you like to add anything about your interest?
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcetti. Thank you, Mr. Wesson, for the wonderful comments. It'll be my pleasure to serve again as the City Commissioner for the City of Los Angeles, and I thank all of the council members for this opportunity again to serve the city.
Thank you for putting yourself forward. And if no other members wish to be heard, let's go ahead and make it official from the full council. Please prepare the roll on the nomination and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Congratulations, Commissioner, and welcome aboard. Thank you so much. Next item, if we can hold actually number 18 for Mr. Rosendahl and go into the next one after that.
Next one then is item number 21, and that was called special by Councilmember Labange, and Mr. Parks did do a verbal amendment.
Okay, Mr. Labange?
Is anyone here from the Department of Transportation? Just to let you know, and members, if what we have a situation on city streets, they have a prohibition on detached trailers, but they have to post the signs. This would be adjusted. And I don't know, maybe is Maria here from CLA? Anybody here? She says, I want you to hear this. Can we hold it for a minute and try to get somebody here, Mr. President? Because it impacts neighborhoods, and I think it impacts your district as well as mine.
Be happy to. Any department in particular?
We'll put it on hold.
Okay. Go to the next item, please.
Next item is item 23, and that was called special for cards.
Okay, Zumadog on item 23.
Oh. Is this the REAP? Oh, yeah, let's take a minute right here because people ask me, first of all, my name's Zumadog, also known as David. You can see on the ballot, I'm running for mayor next March 3rd. And one of the big problems here, people ask me, I think that the city of Los Angeles, City Council of Villaraigosa, they've changed the character of the city. And they do it through zoning exemptions and variances. And this is an example of that right here. Now, I don't know about the specifics of this exact case, but I'd like to remind council that the infrastructure, and especially DWP, the infrastructure, the transformers, it cannot accommodate all the density that you're jamming down the city's throat. And you do it every time you do these variances and exemptions and just flat out turning a blind eye. And I'm here to say, ladies and gentlemen, it is not up for 15 people and one corrupt racketeering of a mayor to change the character of the city. This is not what Los Angeles is supposed to be.
Thank you, Mr. Dog. That will close our public comment on that item. Did you just put a card in? Come forward. Mr. Sachs?
Thank you,
On
Mr.
item
President.
23.
I just did put that card in.
Sure, no problem.
I was just wondering, since you're making amendments to this Los Angeles Municipal Code, could you also explain the amendments that you're making to the Brown Act? You recently just heard
I'm
that...
sorry, sir. We're talking just on this one. In general public comment, you could bring up items about the Brown Act. We'd be more than happy to hear. But if you can stick to the changes that are here and not just use that as a pivot
What part of the
point
Los
to
Angeles
talk about something
Municipal
else.
Code states that the public is not allowed to comment on verbal or written amendments?
Thank you, sir. You're still off topic, and that you had a warning on that, so that'll end the public comment on that. If you could bring that to general public comment, we'd be happy to hear that, but it's out of order, unfortunately, right now. Thank you. That will close our public comment on item 23. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Item number 24, call special for cards.
Mr. Dog, item number 24 is next, and Mr. Sachs will follow that.
Okay, boy. The thought that I might actually be mayor this time next week, and these damn rent escrows that keep coming through the agenda day in and day out, every one of them a potential federal racketeering lawsuit waiting to happen. And I'd like to warn council and put it on the record that a federal lawsuit regarding these programs are being filed in a federal court. How much is that going to cost when you lose? It's called racketeering. And there's really nothing in Deming's 14-point plan that addresses racketeering, except that you have to be a leader, and leaders don't racket. And here's how it's happening. You have these, the apartments throughout the city owned by the mom and pop owners that are housing low-income renters. Okay, we don't really have affordable housing program in this city, so let's just say that that we have some of these low-income renters staying in these mom and pop buildings. Well, what the city does is they say, well, gee, we need to make some money. We want to take that rent money. We don't want it to go to the landlord. We want it to go to the city. We want the money. So they say, oh, you got to make some aesthetic improvements, not having anything to do with public safety. Well, no banking institutions allowing these property owners to make these aesthetic improvements under these economic times. And so the city says, oh, you didn't do what we said. and now you're under rent escrow, and the city takes the money, not the landlord. And so the landlords, they can't put up with all of this stuff, so they end up having to sell the building, and it goes to a special interest. It goes to one of your favorite contractors. That's who it goes to, and they kick out the renters, and they go into the streets, and then they make a luxury condo that nobody can afford, and that's how you screw the renters and the property owners. You pretend to care about both of them while you're sticking it to each, and the homelessness is going to get worse. And I'm here to say, Zuma Dog for mayor. Let's end the insanity. Ding dong, the wicked witch is dead.
Thank you, Mr. Dog. Just as a point of information, again, if that ownership changes, any evictions are illegal, and those are not permitted under the city law. Arnold Sachs is our next speaker, and then we will go to the next item after that, Mr.
Yes,
Sachs.
thank you, Arnold Sachs. Just curious to know when the reprogram will be initiated against the property bound by Hill Street, First Street, Temple, and Spring, also known as AKA the Grand Avenue Project. The money has been allocated for city to do the study, the redevelopment agency, and nothing is coming up on the property. It's laying in waste. When is the city council going to act on that property?
So it does not, that is not housing right now, so that does not apply to that. But again, it seems to be out of order. If you'd like to say anything about this specific rent escrow thing that we have here for tenants, please give us your comments. Otherwise, you're out of order again.
So I should fall under the rent escrow program. I'm out of order.
Thank you. We just ask everybody's understanding under those rules that we need to talk about each issue that is before us and not use that as a way to talk about other issues. So thank you for your understanding and your compliance with that. Please close the public comment and let's open the roll. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. Next item, please.
I believe 26 and 27 were both called special for Mr. Cardenas. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
Yes, he is expected a little later. Let's go to the next item.
The next item is item 28, and that was called special for cards.
Okay, Mr. Sachs, item number 28, and then Mr. Dog on the same item. We're holding 26 and 27 right now.
Yes, thank you. Item 28. It's a renewable energy grant for research programs. How much money will be allocated for the research programs of this grant? Will any money be actually used for public benefit, or will it all be sucked up by these research grants and the special interests that they represent? You look at some of the research grants or the studies that have been done in the city of L.A., you could fund Fort Knox on the amount of money that the studies in L.A., the city of L.A. has produced. So is there a possibility for the public to know what will be available and how will this impact the solar initiative that the DWP wants to address? Why isn't this money being used for any of that infrastructure?
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Our next speaker is Mr. Dog. Can I wave on this? Okay. Mr. Dog waves, and that will close our public comment on this item. Any members wishing to be heard? If not, let's go ahead and prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. Next item, please.
Next item is item 29, and that was called special for cards.
All right, item number 29, Mr. Dog. Okay, he waves on item number 29 right now. So let's take a vote on 29. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
All right, that is approved. If there's no objection, let's send 28 forthwith. That leaves us with item 26 and 27. Let's take up number 27 first.
I got the departments here if you want.
Okay, why don't we go back to that, and then we'll come back for 27, if you don't mind, Mr. Dog. Just 1 second. Mr. Labange on item 21.
Members, we have a representative from the CLA's office here. Basically, in some parts of the city, whether it's the advertising trailers or long semi-trailers or Airstream trailers, whatever the case may be, a detached trailer, if it's on a street that's posted, it can be impounded and removed, but the street has to be posted. This here is effecting a change in that to allow all streets, correct?
Correct.
Good. And also, Mr. Parks wants to look at the aspect of the tractor, which is part of the tractor trailer, or the diesel truck that is detached from a trailer too as well, which will have a friendly amendment or a direct amendment to have the city attorney look at that to come back with a recommendation either to enhance this one or come up with a separate one for that.
Okay, we can do that as well.
Okay, you can write that up. All right, members, just wanted to FYI. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, let's go ahead and open the roll on that item, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved. If we can go to item 27, and Mr. Dog, if you'd like to come forward on item number 27.
Yes, time to address the most serious issue in the city. And somebody said, Zuma Dog, you got to stop saying every issue is the most serious issue in the city. But I think, I'm sure most people would agree we're talking about the office of the mayor and the gang reduction and youth development status report. Now, Reverend Jeff Carr is here, who is pivotal in the gang reduction. And I just said, gee, this time next week, I could be the next mayor. He said, well, will I still have a job? I said, well, hell yeah. We just put all this time and investment into having them get up to speed. This is no time to change course. But I will say that I'm very concerned that we have a vindictive, retaliatory, fear-based mayor that most people don't trust. And he has taken all the gang program money and put it under his office, and then he will not release the list of people who are getting the money. That's right, a secret list. So here we have a mayor that most people do not trust, who has taken this most important money, put it under his roof, and will not tell us who is getting the money. So the first thing is, and please, if I can have some quiet, I cannot believe that we have council members not paying attention to a discussion about gang intervention money.
Mr. Dog, we're listening. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So I'd like to say, as mayor of Los Angeles, the number one goal must be to make sure that this money to develop the community through these programs makes it into the community and not into these front-end loaded management contracts. I don't want these managers driving BMWs. I don't want them buying Wave Runners. I don't want their family members taking the money. I want it to go straight into the community. And as mayor, I will have to do much, much more. We can't leave it up to the schools and other entities. You have to jump right in there through the media, through an education campaign. I'll be showing up all over the place, and we have to get jobs for the people out of prison. Okay, this money should be used for job training for the people who are out of prison, and you're not going to be able to save everybody. And I know some very good council members say you can't, reach all these people, but that doesn't mean you don't reach none of them. So I want to make sure this money is spent prudently. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dog. We have a request to continue 26 and 27 for 1 week. So if there's no objection, we'll continue those till the 4th of March. Okay, so ordered. If we can go back to number 18, and Mr. Rosendahl called a special. Mr. Rosendahl.
Yes, if I could have Paul come on up and talk about it. Film LA, folks, as you know, is an oversight group that deals effectively with the entertainment industry in dispatching filmmakers and television commercials and everybody else into the field to create product. What we want to do is keep filming in LA. Come on up to the podium, Paul, and introduce yourself and tell us. Paul came on board to run Film LA just a few months ago, and I'd like him to give us a few facts about what Film LA is doing and the state of the industry right now. What we're doing today, by the way, is continuing his relationship with us until December of this year. Paul, introduce yourself and tell us what you found out so far.
Thank you. I'm Paul Audley. I'm the president of Film LA, and I want to express my appreciation to the members of the council that I've met with so far for your attention and your responses, and there are a few left for me to meet. I think probably the most surprising thing to me as I began the journey here was the amount of interest by neighborhoods, the industry, and the city governments in the direction of the film industry, and certainly in how we try to balance the kind of three tiers, the government, clients, the customers in the industry, and the community members in the decision-making that we do. What we found is an industry struggling to remain in California and in Los Angeles in particular. We brought some of those items to your attention about parking, utilities, noise, and the cost of doing business in the city. Not so much by the city's funds, but by what it costs them to be in a neighborhood. So I appreciate your time and attention to those. We'll continue to work with you on addressing them.
And you just heard in the state budget that they have $500 million set aside to incent films to stay in California. What's your take on that, how that's going to impact us in Los Angeles?
Well, the good news about those incentives at $100 million a year available is that the smaller films and television may be able to return, and in fact are talking about returning to Los Angeles and California. The cap on the film at 75 will keep the major features away, which of course have completely fled the state. So it's an open door, but it's only open a crack, and I think it'll need to be opened much wider to truly return the film industry to California.
When you came here, you came with no bias. You came from out of state, and you're looking at it objectively. Why has films gone to 40 other states and all over the world, and why have we shrunk the industry in the home place where it should be continuing?
Well, the direct response to that from the studios and the independent producers is the tax incentives, anywhere from 25 to 40% in other states.
And do you suggest, as you go forward with us, that maybe we should find a little more business-friendly in the context of the film industry here in our city?
Absolutely. I think the smaller budget items, what makes them leave Los Angeles and the state are the costs of doing local business, and that is more about the cost to film in neighborhoods and downtown than it is about the cost of the city doing business with them.
And filming in neighborhoods, how should we do that to protect the neighborhood as well as to protect the industry?
Well, our job is to make sure that we have people on site, and particularly in sensitive neighborhoods. But in general, the whole goal is to arrest those that are overused, to be aware we have staff involved in those neighborhoods with your field deputies as well, giving us information back and forth. But it is about building a public education campaign and a cooperation explaining to the industry why they need to keep the renewable resource of the neighborhoods in the downtown, and also to explain to the neighborhoods why it's important to them to allow up to 250 or 300 Angelinos to be working in their neighborhood.
And last question is Film LA itself. Explain what it is, since you're now running it, to those who don't understand what Film LA's responsibilities are.
Film LA's responsibility is to coordinate the permit process for film and television in Los Angeles, the county, and several other communities, as well as school districts. We do that by coordinating the city departments, in the case of the City of Los Angeles, to get the permits out on time, released, and then we monitor that activity on the street for compliance.
And thank you very much for stepping to the plate on that. And colleagues, I would like us, if we would, to approve continuing the relationship with Film LA and with Paul until the end of this year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your leadership on this, Mr. Rosendahl. You may want to stay there. We have two other council members, and they may want to ask you some questions, but Mr. Zine and Mr. LaBonge are next. Mr. Zine.
Mr. President, if we get quiet in the chambers, please.
Yes, if we can ask folks to please, and at the sergeants at arms to please take their conversations outside.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
We met yet?
Yes, we did.
See, good memory. The issue on security, I keep getting asked about the security issues on the set, in particular throughout Los Angeles. The officers that work that, I know that the police department has an issue with it. The officers who are working it from the movie aspect to protect the actors, the field scenes, etc. Where's that situation going now?
My understanding, the Assistant Chief McDonald just presented to the industry last week, and I understand he'll be presenting to the motion picture officers the plan on March 21st. My understanding of the proposal from the police department is that the uniform will change and that the motion picture officers will still be available to the film industry, and in addition, they will make active duty Los Angeles police officers available.
So the officers that currently are retired would continue to work, but in a different uniform, and then the LAPD would be providing on-duty personnel, or I should say
active off-duty.
Active off.
That's my understanding.
As we do at the airport, where they provide security, they're off-duty, active on overtime. So what you're looking at least preliminary, is that the retired folks will still have a position, and the active folks on a day off would be able to do that for additional compensation.
That is the proposal as presented last week.
Okay, because I know that I get questions from both sides, from the retired folks, questions from the active folks. But I think we're starting to phase out some of the off-duty security activity at the airport, and there's a concern with the economy. A lot of these officers need that overtime, and the department's overtime budget seems to be shrinking. So at least they'll have the opportunity of that and still provide the security services. Now, around the country, when it comes to security, law enforcement providing that, whether it be the East Coast, the mid part of the country, or here on the West Coast? Do any cities provide that at the taxpayer's expense, or is the movie company always paying for that?
No, several cities, including New York City, provided at taxpayer expense.
So in New York City, if they're doing a film shoot, the NYPD would provide the personnel whatever resources, no charge to the movie company, so that would come out of the police budget, but in return, I would assume that they're doing the movie shoot in the city of New York.
Correct.
So that's the trade-off. But that's not what they plan here. They'll still be at the expense of the movie industry.
The proposal said that the LAPD active off-duty officers would be billed by the police department, and that the motion picture officers, the retired officers, would be contracted directly with the movie company.
Okay, but the on-duty, the active officers,
the movie industry would pay, billed directly by LAPD for the services.
Okay. And were those, as the movie industry, willing to do that? Would there be additional cost to the industry for that?
Oh, I can't speak for the movie industry. I know that there's been pushback on virtually any additional expenses on filming in Los Angeles.
That's a concern. If it gets too high, then they're going to say, let's go to some other location. I think there's got to be a fairness, since we want to encourage the productions here, at the same time provide the proper security and have a delicate balance on that. So that's going to come out in March, you say?
He's presenting it to the motion picture officers on March 21.
The motion picture officers. And then what about the industry?
The industry he did last Friday.
And what was the response to that?
They were courteous and responded to him with some concerns about expertise of the on-duty, the active off-duty officers versus the motion picture officers.
Okay.
There was not a lot of dissent in the room. I have no idea what a follow-up might have happened.
So it's moving toward some type of conclusion, would you say?
I would.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We have Mr. Labange, Mr. Reyes, Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendahl. Thank you for your leadership in Public Works, Chair, and all that work there, and allowing me to come and ask a few questions on that. How many films are being shot in Los Angeles right now today?
I don't know how many are being filmed right now today.
Just to let you know, when the head of the port comes in, I ask him how many ships are in the harbor in San Pedro, they tell me, and also when our airport officials there, and I ask them how many flights have been in by 11:01, they tell me. So I'm going to give you a little slack this morning. Okay.
Thanks. We're here for the contract. We typically have about 85 permits out a day.
85 permits out a day.
So that would be about a standard.
Good. And I was teasing you on
That's
that.
all right.
Little show business. This has been used in many, many, many films where you sit.
Yep.
Back in Chinatown, Jack Nicholson sat right over there when they ran in all the sheep. So we want to use City Hall. How is the city cooperating with film companies?
For the most part, it's very easy to work with the city, in particular on city locations. There are others that have much more public impact, like parks, which naturally have to balance the need of the public to be there, and it becomes more difficult to make that relationship work.
How does that work, and how can I help it? I happen to chair the Arts and Parks Committee, happen to have Griffith Park. I do believe in the axiom, a rock's a rock, a tree's a tree. Go shoot it in Griffith Park. There's 250,000 people who are related to your industry. We want to balance that out. Film companies are important.
Well, we're working now to try and deal with the weekend filming ban to find ways around that. So your help there would be very beneficial to the industry and our discussion.
Good. Well, if I could have a Vox attention, maybe I could do a little motion and with Mr. Rosendahl and Public Works Commission, maybe Arts and Parks have a little joint hearing on the issue of parks. I know Warner Brothers filmed a movie up at the observatory, and I heard they had to struggle more than they wanted. I watched that whole movie. In the end, they credit the University of Nebraska for a football scene they had out there with Big Red, Go Big Red on it, but they said nothing to thank you to the city of Los Angeles, so maybe we could do something to help people and enhance it. These are monuments here that should be protected, whether it's the observatory or City Hall or Central Library, but they should be shared with the filmmakers to give them the creative spirit. I'm still coming off the glow dust of the Academy Awards last weekend that says why this town's so important. And I know I'm not talking on the issues, Mr. City Attorney, but maybe you could be an extra in one of my films. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Reyes.
Here he comes.
And then after that, we'll hear from his own.
Thank you, Council President. I had the pleasure of speaking to you, and we were discussing the different issues and the challenges that we have. Now, my colleagues have mentioned this other concern about the amount of business that's actually occurring in Los Angeles. If I recall correctly, I believe you mentioned there's only one major movie being produced in Los Angeles?
To the best of our knowledge, there are 3 being made in what we would call major features, it's over $75 million budget.
And what used to happen in Los Angeles?
Last year even, there were 22, and prior to that, there might be more than 100.
So we're from 100 to 22 to 3. Now, in extending this contract and looking at permit processes, does that include any type of change that might perhaps trigger a higher number of production and or business for the city in the future?
The contract doesn't directly, but our ability to continue working allows us to implement a program that we're undertaking. In fact, the other meeting I'm supposed to be at is a public education campaign in conjunction with the unions, guilds, and the studios about filming in California and why it's important to the residents of the state and the city. And that work will be very important in returning that business.
So when we talk about the conduct of these companies, is it also relevant to speak to the conduct of the different interest groups who influence the decision of filming or not filming in Los Angeles?
Absolutely. I think, we work in 3 places. One is the governments that permit, and there's a lot of work that we can do, and we're finding good cooperation. We work with the industry, and there's a lot of work they can do to make themselves more welcome in the community. And we work in the community as well, and there's a lot of work we need to do there to have them understand why it's important to be present with the film industry in their neighborhoods.
See, the one piece that, unless you can correct me, and hopefully I'm wrong, but the one piece that I see missing here is that you have different chambers of commerce in our different commercial corridors. You have business investment districts being formed that are made up of property owners who own businesses in the commercial corridors where a lot of this filming occurs. Mm-hmm. Have we made an effort to create some level of coordination with these bodies that are forming in the past 3 to 4 years so that we can create a more welcoming environment and a less, how can I say this, kind of like the Wild Wild West. Whoever comes in is able to gouge and get money when they can. Could we start looking at a structure that allows for that type of communication and coordination?
Yeah, I think that there's been a missing link in the process. We have been successful in bringing people from the city.
I'm sorry, but Council President, it's hard
I can
to
ask,
hear.
there's a group of folks that are kind of having a meeting on the side over here. If I can ask the Sergeant at Arms to ask them to either move outside for that meeting, and other folks, if they can please clear so that we can have some silence in here. Thank you.
Councilmember Reyes, I think we've been helpful in when those new regulations and districts form in trying to get uniform regulation. The problem that's frequently cited by the industry is that depending on where they are, things change dramatically within the city about how they can do their work, and it is confusing and difficult. I do appreciate the interest many of you have expressed in the issue of the extraordinary expense from some landowners, both private businesses and residences, for what it costs them to do business, and our ability to help change that pattern in the city to make it easier for film to be present.
Are you in a position, given the experience that you're going through, to perhaps get some feedback and establish, for lack of a better word, a code of conduct or rules or some level of a playing field that doesn't allow for this type of gouging, but also makes the production companies accountable for their behavior and how they treat community stakeholders? Shouldn't there be a reciprocation and such body of information? Does that exist, or is that something we should put together?
There is an absolute requirement for reciprocation, or the neighborhood has a right to end the relationship with filming, and so they must cooperate with each other. There are codes of ethics currently in place for filmmakers, which we use and in fact print for even student filmmakers when they come out about how to conduct themselves. they are penalized through Film LA in their future work if they don't follow by being forced to have full-time monitors present on the site to make sure they do comply. I think the other side of it is one that I know is being looked at by the CLA, CAO, and the City Attorney's Office about some ability to prevent people from purposefully preventing a permitted activity in the city to go forward. That will be very helpful in creating the balance that allows us then sort of negotiate the peaceful work in a neighborhood and in a downtown.
I know I have about 40 seconds left, but I do want to there are certain neighborhoods that are used over and over again, like back lots. I mean, Highland Park, parts of Echo Park, Lincoln Heights. I mean, these are great background, period architecture pieces that are historic in nature. How often we go back and intrude upon them, and yet trying to create the reciprocation and scheduling how often the community can absorb those types of impacts is a place I'm hoping we can get so that there's a level of predictability so that the film industry can feel comfortable knowing that these locations and this background scenery is available, but maybe limit them and at the same time create predictability so that the film company can know that they can take they can complement their business goals while complementing the community's welfare. Is that a document you think we can see in the near future?
Sure, we can I can provide you now in a very unpredictable industry. We do our best. And as an example, one of the neighborhoods that was overused by our estimation was what we call rested, where we told location managers it's been overused, you can't go there, we need to reduce the impact, and then began to figure out what was the balance that was tolerable for those neighborhoods. Clearly, it also changes from neighborhood to neighborhood, which is why it becomes so difficult. Some are very welcoming. They want it all the time. Some schools want it there all the time because they get revenue from it. And other community groups and neighborhoods never want it. And so the balance isn't static across the different communities and neighborhoods. And what we try to do is we hear and begin to get the pushback, or our own data shows an area is overused. Our production planning group will suggest alternatives and actively rest a particular area of the city.
So in these economic times, we went from how many to, what was
22 major films last year, and to the best of my knowledge this year, 3. Over 75 million.
And we were standardizing before
100 plus.
So 100 plus movies made, to 22 last year, to 3 this year. Colleagues, I really think this deserves some legislative attention that speaks to how inviting we can be as a city, and perhaps with the mayor's office, work on a 3-point plan or an 8-point plan, but something that says, come and work in Los Angeles, create jobs, generate revenue, and continue to celebrate this great city for all that it has to offer, and not let other cities and states literally take business away from Los Angeles. So this is a wake-up call.
Thank you.
And just so you know, Mr. Reyes, we did have a report that came out last week that was from a motion that we did specifically on what is the city's plan, and the state just passed as part of its budget a $100 million tax credit, which we've been lobbying for many years. So that report should be coming forward, so we'll make sure that that's here, and we're going to be taking that up in committee shortly.
Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Bet. Ms. Hahn.
Thank you. It's been a good discussion because I think we've all been very concerned. It used to be we talked about runaway films, and now they've already run away. They're gone. And I was just going to get your take overall on, which you probably already said a couple times, but one more time to me. What can we do? What can we actually do to provide these kinds of incentives to keep, these films here? We know, I will say Film LA has done a better job working with the neighborhoods and chambers and neighborhood councils on some of the issues that particularly in residential areas or downtown business areas that have had problems with filming. But I think overall, particularly in these bad times, we want these films to be shot here in LA at our facilities. We want to attract that business here. overall, what should we do?
Well, I think the beginning of the opening the door from the state on the incentives is absolutely critical for the major films. Without it, they will not return, period. There's nothing else you can do. At the smaller films and the television level, which can be highly productive for the economy, the city's actions in providing available parking in downtown and other neighborhoods, which is costing $20,000 to $50,000 a day to television and film today, needs to be something there would help them keep them in Los Angeles. It's a major budget impact. Helping to avoid some of the kinds of payments being made up to $110,000 a day for certain intersections in this city to work, those things will return filming. In addition, I think the campaign we're entering on to explain about what this brings. As an example, the only thing we're seeing growing in Los Angeles today is reality television. 80 people, $80,000 an episode versus episodic television, 250 to 300 people working every day and up to $3 million a day into the city's economy. We need to return those in addition to the big films in order to make the real difference. And a big part of that is going to be us helping educate the community about that importance to the economy. And by the way, there's nothing that can return faster than the film industry to help support the economy in Los Angeles. They're a totally mobile community. They can pick up and move tomorrow or make the decisions today to start filming in Los Angeles and make a dramatic impact quickly.
But they won't do that until some of these things are absolutely out there on the table.
We need some resolution to those issues.
Right. Well, that's good to hear, and I think that's critical. I also was in awe Sunday. The whole world was celebrating movies, and the whole world was celebrating Hollywood. And to think that those films are going somewhere else to be shot,
those films are all made somewhere else.
And made somewhere else. You know, it's just really disheartening, I think, to all of us. Again, the Port of Los Angeles has been in a ton of films. San Pedro, I know, has been in a ton of films. But we need to figure out how to bring that back. And the parking issue is interesting, and that might be something I work with the Port of Los Angeles on, because we have loads of parking that sometimes is vacant, depending on whether or not the cruise ships are in berth or not. So that might be an opportunity.
Councilman Burhan, that might be very helpful in addition, because we're promoting the container ships which are now being laid at anchor because they're not being used as film locations. So parking will be important for that.
Okay. It's a win-win.
It is.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, colleagues. And I'll try to do this in a minute, since this kind of veered a little bit away from film permitting per se. And Mr. Reyes and Ms. Hahn and others were asking, what's happening. That report, which is which was released last week, we got a lot of press on it. We had a lot of analysis. We've been doing a lot of meetings with the industry. So instead of starting afresh, I want to just give people an idea of where we are and what we are doing. What we're looking at for this coming year, and we've done a number of things in this council already. We did business tax reform to raise the threshold for production here. We should look at that again and raise it even higher at the level at which the city will not tax productions that are here. We looked also at payroll tax credits at the state level, and that's some of the piece that just went through in the stimulus, in the statewide budget resolution, which is encouraging, because there are many years of talking about it and people figured it couldn't happen this year, but we've got some movement there, and we should be as aggressive as possible in building that up, because that's the most critical piece. The city is really much less powerful than the state in these bottom line decisions. We're looking at building out utility boxes with a DWP that will allow productions to plug in instead of having their generators in downtown, in Hollywood, and possibly one place in the valley for starters. We're looking at the parking situation downtown. There's an exorbitant amount that people have to pay for parking, whether we can use city facilities in our city lots, not just downtown, but throughout the city on weekends and other times, to allow those trucks that they have to come in to have a reasonable rate so that we don't lose it to Houston because it's half the price because of our parking. We're looking at what we can do to make the lowest stories and parking structures higher to allow those trucks to come in to help with production as well. We're looking at the PSAs that you mentioned as well, and just met with some of those same union folks about about how can we show the multiplier effect of a dollar spent then goes to a caterer, goes to a florist, and is spent many times in this economy. And we're also looking at what we can do in terms of our local workforce training dollars, and how do we take those and help people who are hiring new employees to pay for part of their staff where they can keep them on for a year, because that's the federal requirements. So there's really a pretty robust package. And then the last piece that I'd like to see is I'd like us to have kind of a Film Czar person here that isn't a Film LA person, but somebody who is the point person at City Hall who the industry can go to and say, look, we're having XYZ problem, either economic development, legislative, whatever, and have that person be here, a single person that we can use with existing dollars, maybe from the mayor's business team, maybe from our community development department or a CRA, to have one person who would be here. So that's some of the work that the CLA has been working very hard on. If you'd like to get involved with it, check out that council file, have your staff look at it, because there's been a tremendous amount of work that the CLA put in, and we thank him for his work as well. And thank you for yours.
Mr. Rosendahl.
Yes, just to wrap it up, colleagues, you've all had an opportunity to see Film LA's leadership and what an incredible gentleman he is, and really a treasure to LA. And as to what Mr. Zine was talking about off-duty officers or retired officers, we're going to have a special discussion on that and an update on April 1st before the Public Works Committee. It has been controversial, and we look forward to a more positive resolution where we can have off-duty officers as well as retired officers. It's not part of this motion here, but we need to find a way to keep costs down in LA so we can keep the film industry in LA. And thank you for your commitment to us, and I ask for an aye vote on this, Mr. President.
Thank you. We had a public hearing in committee. If nobody wishes to reopen that, we'll add that to the record. Mr. Sachs was submitted a card. Let's go ahead and open the roll on this item, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved. There are no amendments added to that. And let's go ahead and take up we can reconsider item 27. Mr. Cardenas is here. I'd like to still continue item 26, but if there's no objection, please open the roll on reconsideration, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Okay, that is back before us. Mr. Cardenas, item number 27.
Thank you very much. Council members, what we have before us is the first of a series of quarterly reports from the Mayor's Office regarding the gang reduction and youth development status for the City of Los Angeles. Before it was known as Bridges 1 and Bridges 2, we, the City Council, formally moved those issues into the Mayor's Office. The names have changed, faces have changed, but the difference now is that part of that motion was for the City Council to be apprised of what's going on a quarterly basis. So thank you, Jeff Carr, for coming forward and giving us this report. I have some questions. Some of them might be a little redundant. Not all the members are in the committee that this went through. So I'll be asking you some questions so that my colleagues can hear the answers. In terms of the LA Bridges program closeout, apparently, to date, there's been just over 700 successful transitions of youth who are being served by the Bridges 1, who are now being provided services currently. Of those, how did it come about at that amount? How many more do we anticipate pulling forward formally as part of this new process in the months to come?
Well, good morning, Mr. President and Councilman Cardenas and other members of council. Maybe if I could briefly just give a little overview of the report just for a few folks and then answer that question. I think I just want to say that, first of all, in more than 6 months since the council and mayor established this Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development, really our objective has been very simple, and that is to marshal as many resources as possible, as quickly and effectively as possible, to get them to the kids in the neighborhoods who are at the greatest risk and in greatest need. And in fact, in these first 6 months, I would say we've not solved all the problems, nor have we attempted to solve every single problem and challenge what has historically plagued the city's efforts to reduce gang crime and keep kids out of gangs. But I think we have made tremendous progress. And we've tried to use the Advancement Projects report, the City Controller's Blueprint for Change, and the Mayor and Council's direction as a guide. And we've set in motion major institutional change, which I believe will provide far more effective, transparent, and accountable means for the city to reduce gang violence and keep our kids from joining gangs. And in fact, the City Controller's Blueprint for Change actually contained more than 120 specific recommendations to provide more efficient and effective gang prevention intervention services. And by our own estimation, We have either fully implemented or made great progress in implementing over 90% of those recommendations. And given the significance of this crisis, our clear priorities have been the kids most likely to join gangs and the neighborhoods suffering from most violence. Implementing technical solutions to bureaucratic problems is important, but in our view it pales in comparison to the responsibility we have to the kids and families who are living with the threat of gang violence and the influence of gang activity every single day. So with that said, I think in answering this question, we actually have, as you said, transitioned about 700 young people. What we did with the final 6 months of the Bridges 1 contracts, each contractor was required to have 25 clients because we knew this program was ending to transfer those kids out. Some of those kids have been transferred to other programs, to other agencies, and some agencies who are now our new contractors in the grid zones have actually assessed those kids and are starting to look into enroll them in our programs going forward.
Okay. So how many, it's my understanding that the Bridges program had just over 4,000 youth that they were accounting for being serviced in a manner that was in the previous system. What's the goal of the formal, and I want to make it very clear, beyond the formal number of kids who are being tracked and have a certain amount of contact requirements in order for the service providers to do their job, beyond that, it is understood that we are touching many more children and families beyond that core. But based on that core of individuals, how many is it your goal to have within that formal process?
Well, as you mentioned, it was probably somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 kids in all of the 27 Bridges sites. But it's important to remember that 50 kids in each one of those 27 sites, which would have been about 1,300 young people, were provided intensive case management and services. There were an additional 100 young people that each of those agencies had to just touch or interact with that young person twice during the course of a year. Our strategy moving forward in each one of the 12 Gang Reduction Youth Development Zone areas targets 200 young people for intensive case management and service. And in fact, the way we define that is that the agencies will have to have at least a minimum of 3 face-to-face contact per week with the child, as well as a minimum of 1 face-to-face contact per month with the adult or the significant parent or the guardian in that kid's life. So in the course of a year, in just our 12 gang reduction zones, we'll serve 2,400 middle school kids, 10 to 15-year-olds, and then we actually sent forth a transmittal yesterday for recommendations for a number of things, including 12 intervention agencies in the 12 grid zones, 4 prevention programs outside the grid zones, and 4 intervention programs. So if you add up all of the young people who will serve with that intensive 3 times a week and the parent once a month, it'll be somewhere in the range of 2,600 young people on an annual basis. So about twice the number of what the city was serving in the LA Bridges program.
And when do you anticipate having all of the intervention and prevention providers identified and under contract, and then also the evaluation providers? When do you anticipate having that all together?
Well, we actually submitted a transmittal to council yesterday with our recommendations for the intervention providers for all 12 of the Gang Reduction Youth Development Zones, which was one of our requests for proposals we did. We also, as I said, made recommendations yesterday, forwarded our recommendations for 4 providers or 4 projects for gang intervention outside the grid zones, 4 prevention projects, as well as the research and evaluation component. Assuming we're able to expedite that fairly quickly through the City Council and get approval for contracting, our target date that we think we're on schedule to meet is to actually have all those contracts in place by April 1st.
Okay, so the contracts will be in place and/or the service providing will start on April 1st?
I would say the contracts will be in place probably on the intervention side. Some of the service will begin very immediately. On the areas outside the grid zones for prevention and intervention, it will probably take them a little bit to get started. We'll have to train them on how to use the youth services eligibility tool that we're now doing for screening to get the kids, as well as some basic training. But the focus of their first quarter, especially for the prevention providers, will be really outreach and recruitment to get all these young people to engage them and get them enrolled in these programs.
Okay, so comfortably all of the plans and the matrix that you have developed will be 99% in place over the next 60, maybe 70 days at the most.
Yeah, and then it'll just be a matter of recruiting young people. All of the outreach and the recruitment and enrolling those young people will begin at that point on April 1st.
But the infrastructure?
Infrastructure will be in place on April 1st, yes.
Okay. Everybody understands that the most dynamic, moving target in all this are the young people. The names may change, incidents may occur, what have you. Intervention work might, have to move around a little bit or what have you, but the bottom line is what my main point today for the report is to make sure that the council members understand that all of the plans that were developed will be, the infrastructure of it will be in place over the next 60 to 70 days at the most.
Yeah, and what I failed to mention also, I was just specifically speaking about the prevention programs of about 2,600 young people. The intervention programs, as you know, will be implementing the two-pronged approach to both interrupt the violence and do crisis response, but then also the wraparound services, comprehensive services. Each of the intervention agencies in the 12 grid zones will be working with an annual caseload of 50 clients who are gang-involved young people on an annual basis, which will mean we'll serve with those areas as well as the non-grid zone intervention projects, probably in the range of 750 gang-involved young people on an annual basis minimally. And then I think it's also important, as you met some of the ancillary things, we're, as you know, going to expand our Summer Night Lights program from last summer where we only had 8 sites to 15 sites this summer. Last summer, in 8 weeks, the first summer we ever did this, we had over 50,000 visits in those target parks. We expect to increase that. Obviously, we'll increase that because we're almost doubling the number of parks, but we expect to have well over 100,000 visits to those various Summer Night Lights programs from July 8th through September 5th when we operate that.
Okay, there was a little bit of a surprise a couple weeks ago when the head of the Recreation and Parks Department basically let us know what kind of changes would have to be made within that department at local parks throughout the city if, in fact, they were to receive a reduction or have to deal with the 30% reduction in their budget. And some of the council members pointed out that, wait a minute, you're going to be reducing you potentially could be reducing some services in parks that are actually in the gang reduction zones. And so my question to you is, what's the communication been like before then or since then with Recreation and Parks, because that was a major concern of a lot of us?
Well, we've certainly been in conversation with Recreation and Parks. I think anything at this point is to some degree still conjecture just because the budget, as you know, is still being formulated. I think we obviously are moving into a very difficult time fiscally, and there's going to be some tough decisions that are going to have to be made about budgets and resources. But we're certainly committed, and I know in talking to Rec and Parks, we're committed to moving forward Summer Night Lights and the supporting needs around making sure in those areas where we're doing that program we have the infrastructure and the capacity to run good programs for young people in those park and recreation facilities.
So since then, again, it was all conjecture, and he's just trying to point out the kinds of machinations that he would have to go through with his department. But since then, are you going to be communicating directly with John Muckery, the head of that department, when it comes to him allowing you to understand what his intentions are in the gang reduction zones? Because our parks are critical. You know that, we know that.
Yeah.
When it comes to this issue, are you going to be communicating with him directly?
Yes, I had multiple conversations.
Good. I know that, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody else understood that. Now, you mentioned that you're working with CCYF, LAPD, LAUSD, and the City Attorney's Office to develop a new Safe Passages program. When do you anticipate that you can be ready to put forth your recommendations and the new whatever it's called, whether it's Safe Passages or not?
Well, as you said, we've had multiple meetings, and there's actually been some good staff work that's been done and being done. I believe I have a meeting, we have another meeting next week that I'm involved in. There's lots of meetings that are taking place after that. So we expect to, as I said last week in council, we expect to be able to come back to council with a report within 30 to 45 days, and we're still definitely on that timeline, and hopefully closer to the 30 days than the 45.
Okay, so if everything goes well, sometime by the end of March,
Yes.
early April?
Absolutely.
Excellent. It's good to hear. In addition to that, it's really important for us to understand a lot of the elements that we all talked about as council members and the kinds of commitments that the mayor's office exclaimed that this is the network and the structure of the future, and one of it is accountability and also professionalism of when it comes to interventionists. We have this rolling figure of 20-some, 30-some, maybe 60 interventionists, official or not, or what have you, but we all agreed that we need to make sure that if somebody's going to call themselves an interventionist, if there's going to be funding to go to intervention programs in the city of Los Angeles, we need to hold them accountable. There needs to be a certain amount of professionalism, and there needs to be a certain ability for people to have a certain amount of trust and expectations of these individuals and organizations. And with that comes training. Right now it appears that there's probably several organizations that would like to apprise themselves of being involved in that training, but two of those organizations seem to be in the forefront possibly of providing that kind of training. One of them is Maximum Force Enterprises, and then also the Advancement Project. How is that coming along, and when could we anticipate knowing or seeing what that balance of who's going to provide what courses and what certificates into the near future?
Well, I think you make a good point. There has been a lot of conversation about accountability and professionalization, and we're working on a number of things along that line. First of all, we're actually substantially increasing the number of intervention workers that are actually supported by city dollars. I believe the number has been around 60 in the last number of years. We actually, as part of our request for proposals, we mandated that all 12 of the gang reduction youth development zones have a 9-person team that would be made up of 6 outreach workers, 2 case managers, and 1 supervisor of that team. And then we obviously had smaller teams in these smaller projects outside the gang reduction youth development zones. So there'll be nearly 100, or in some cases just funded through the city, intervention workers. We're implementing a whole process in terms of how we do screening that really goes something like this. Number one is we're working on using actually a criminogenic assessment tool to assess every intervention worker. We'll also be doing a background check as well as drug testing to do some assessment, have some assessment there as well. We also will be, as you mentioned, putting people through a training academy, and then we'll actually be issuing IDs for every intervention worker that will come from our office so that everyone is screened from our office, and also giving them gear. On the intervention training academy, we're really looking at wanting to have what I would call a basic or a core certificated training program that's sort of your basic comprehensive core training program that then would lead to some basic certification, but then whoever does our training institute would also offer about a half a dozen trainings per year that would be on special topics, might be a day or 2 or a week long, that would then, anyone who's actually been through the core training already would be required to take at least 2 of those courses on an annual basis to really start developing the continuing education model of this, not just one time you go through this training and you've learned everything you know about intervention, but that it's an ongoing training model. And we are actually in conversation with not just the Advancement Project and Maximum Force Enterprises, but also the Pat Brown Institute. And we're actually working closely with them. We think collectively we're going to come to some agreement on a common training program, and we actually are hoping to have a training program in place the next class. We want to run eventually 3 classes a year for 25 to 30 people on this core training. We hope to have a class ready to go by June 1st of this year where we come to some new common agreement about a new training and bring all this together.
Good. Glad to hear that. That's excellent.
We're going to have to go to Mr. Zine. We're at a little past 6 minutes.
What's that?
We have a couple other speakers, and we're past 6 minutes on your portion.
Can I ask one last question before I push my button again?
Okay. Real quick one, please.
Yeah, have all the program coordinator positions been filled, and if not, what areas still have that position to be filled?
You're talking about our program managers from our office?
Yes.
We still have to fill a regional position in the West. We've got 4 regional positions. 2 are supervisors in Central and South Bureau because we have 5 zones in each one of those areas, and a person in the Valley and the West Bureau. We need to fill the West Bureau position and the Valley Bureau, and then we need to fill 2 positions in South Los Angeles, so 4 positions, and then we still have 1 policy analyst to fill as well.
And 1 regional person on top of that?
No, the two regional supervisors are actually
think that's
Central
two.
Bureau and South Bureau are filled. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Zine. And then
Thank you, Mr.
John.
President. Hold my time. Just give me half the time Mr. Cardenas had. You had like 6 hours. Okay.
He had a 6 minutes to open. He had a 6 minutes to open per the rules. It took us 15 minutes during that period.
Totally, I support what you're doing. I know it's very, very important. I commend you for the time you spent. Reverend Carr.
Yes, Councilman.
My faith is in you.
Thank you.
Between you and the good Lord, hopefully we can solve some of these
You
problems.
should put your faith in the good Lord more than you
I
put
got
your
it
faith
there
in me.
too. Thank you. Amen. Positions. You didn't mention anything about the San Fernando Valley for positions. You have that staffed?
We have 2 zones in the San Fernando Valley, one in the Mission Panorama City area and one in Foothill Pacoima. Both of those are filled, and then we're still looking for a regional person to cover the areas outside of the grid zones.
Like my district?
Well, your district would fall in the areas that's outside of the gang reduction youth development zones.
Further west toward Topanga Canyon.
So we're looking for someone there.
And on the crime picture, the statistics, I know that overall crime is down in the city. Have we seen, since the program, I know it's relatively new, have we seen impact where it comes to numbers, crime numbers, gang numbers, homicides, et cetera?
Well, last summer, as you know, when we implemented Summer Night Lights, which was where we probably was the beginning of our initial investment in this whole area around prevention and intervention, we tracked crime, gang-related violent crime data and compared it to the summer of 2007 for the same time period. And in those areas where the parks were, those police reporting district, as well as surrounding districts, we saw a 17% reduction in gang-related violent crime overall. We saw actually an 86% reduction in gang-related homicides. We had 1 homicide compared to 7 in those areas in the previous year. And then we had, reductions like 30-some% reduction in victims shot who actually had a bullet penetrate them, 40-some% reduction in shots fired. So we feel like we contributed to that. I think Chief Bratton has been very vocal about saying that this comprehensive approach, he believes, is part of what has helped continue to drive down gang crime. And as you know, about a month ago, the mayor and the chief and I announced that we were going to set a target of a 15% reduction in gang crime for this 2000 year. A lot of people thought that was pretty aggressive, but we felt like we needed to set an aggressive goal to try and achieve that. So
And that's a citywide number.
that's citywide, and so far in the first almost 2 months of the year, actually we're tracking below levels of last year, which you remember last year we were 10%, almost 11% in gang-related crime down citywide from the previous year, in which we were down 9% citywide. So we're actually, every time you compare to the past year where you had reductions again, it gets harder and harder to get those reductions, but we're still tracking very positively, and we feel good about that.
So the program, I know there was a controversy about Bridges 1, Bridges 2, and the transition, because there's always those that advocate for those particular programs because they've been in existence, whether they're controversial or not. We're finding success in the path that we're following through with this new approach.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see in 2009, a lot of the foundation that we've been laying in the last year and a half since I got here is going to come to fruition this year and beyond. And well, as was mentioned earlier, the big thing, I think the big difference between what we're trying to do now and Bridges, there's a few things, but number one, we're targeting the kids that are most at risk of joining gangs. We've now, in terms of intervention, put in a series of protocols and set up the kind of relationships with law enforcement where we have communication channels back and forth. And then lastly, we're going to invest $900,000 a year. You'll see in this transmittal a recommendation to invest $900,000 a year in an evaluator, an outside evaluator, to evaluate whether or not what we're doing is working. And if it's not working, we'll make modifications and change it. And where it is working, we're going to try and strengthen that. And that's going to be something, not a one-time evaluation that we're paying. It's going to be something that we have built into the fabric of this initiative so that it's evaluated on an ongoing basis with somebody who's outside the city family to judge us whether or not we work or not.
So your intentions are to create a safe, comfortable environment in Los Angeles, reduce the gang activity, give people an opportunity, and not go by something because it's there, just because we have it, to stick with it through thick or thin. If it's not working, make the modifications and be brave enough to say, this isn't working, we need to scrap it and come with something else, which has not been the tradition in the past.
Well, that's the commitment I made to the mayor the day I said yes to the job. It's the commitment I made to this council when you all agreed to consolidate everything into the mayor's office around this issue, and I stand by that commitment. And, you know, down the road, if we have some folks and some organizations that are not performing, we'll certainly give them an opportunity and the technical assistance to make the changes necessary to perform. If they don't avail themselves of that, those contracts will go away.
Okay. I got great confidence in you, not only in your faith in the Lord, but the faith in making it better. So
thank you.
Carry on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I was, first of all, this is great that you're coming to the City Council, giving us this first ever report. And colleagues, you know, Jeff Carr mentioned it just briefly in his last couple sentences. It was this council that historically agreed to do something that had never been done before. We, first of all, authorized and funded the first ever comprehensive report on how the City of Los Angeles deals with gang violence. Then it was this council that took that report along with our controller's recommendations and did something that no other council before us agreed to do. We consolidated all of our anti-gang programs, prevention, intervention, into the mayor's office. And then we also did something that we've never done before. We actually agreed to support something that wasn't divided by 15. Because we agreed that fighting gang violence in Los Angeles was going to have to be different than how we appropriated money to fund sidewalk repairs or street pavings. We decided to follow the best advice, which was let's put the resources where the gang violence is. And when the mayor's office under Jeff Carr came up with these gang reduction zones, some of us, you know, some of our areas got left out. But we still stood firm to take the statistics and put the resources where we thought the problem was. So this council deserves a lot of credit for this gang strategy working. And I've seen some of the campaign commercials, and it sounds like just one person in the city is responsible for this. But frankly, it was this council that has allowed this to happen. I will give the mayor credit for hiring Jeff Carr in the first place and creating an office of gang reduction and youth development. But all this stuff that Jeff is talking about today would have never happened if we hadn't agreed to do a couple of those very bold, courageous things. So I really want to thank this council for having faith in Jeff Carr and having faith in that idea that for once we're going to fight gangs in Los Angeles in a strategic, comprehensive, well thought out, and funded to our best ability strategy. So I'll just ask you one question, and that is it working?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's not only is it we're seeing some results now, but I think in the long term we're going to see a lot more results. And I do certainly want to thank you and the other members of the council, not just for the confidence you have in me, but in the belief that the way we were doing this historically wasn't working, that we had to do something different, and to take the risk to do that. And I think we will all see the benefits in more kids alive, not in jail, and young people not getting involved in that destructive lifestyle of violence and on life on the street. And I think that's ultimately what I think we all want to accomplish. So thank you.
Thank you. And I mean, I think my colleagues around here know that this certainly is an issue that I have dealt with from the time I got elected, was trying to figure out how to end gang violence. I'm all about prevention. Certainly intervention is an important piece of that. And I was very proud of us when we put Measure A on the ballot last November, which would have added much more money to fund after-school programs, job training, summer night lights programs. I still think, colleagues, this is a great strategy and it works, but if we had more money to fund this proven strategy, then I think we would be further along in Los Angeles to our goal of really eradicating gang violence in the city, which is a vision I know is quite aggressive and quite lofty, but it's a dream that I have for the city, and I think we're on the way to do that. And I appreciate your hard work, Jeff Carr, and I appreciate my colleagues on this council who did something that no other council before us ever dared to do. So I think together we can all take credit for lowering the crime rate, keeping kids alive, and more importantly, reaching that goal of growing up a generation of kids that will have more positive opportunities than joining a gang. And that's my goal, my wish, and my dream.
Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank Mr. Cardenas for his leadership on that committee, and of course, what Ms. Hahn just said, we wish we had passed that Measure A that you put on the ballot. Augustine Contreras died in the parking lot at Venice High School a couple of 3 years ago. I'll never forget when I got the call and ended up hugging a mother who just lost her son. We saw great reaction by community groups to cool it out and chill it out, and we saw the Gang Intervention Prevention Group, Venice 2000, at work. The other day, when we had a killing at the Mar Vista Gardens, a retribution killing, African-American young man was killed by a Latino, there was tremendous rage in the African-American community. And again, I saw Venice 2000 chill it out and cool out the community. So even in the 11th District, which isn't in the gang zones by the mayor, we do have the Culver City Boys, the B-13, the Shoreline Crips, and others that interact between the Mar Vista, Del Rey area and the Oakwood, Venice area. And we do see graffiti in other parts of the district, which is the territorial boundaries. So we know it's pervasive throughout the entire city. First, I want to thank you for your leadership. You show up at the scene. You're right there. You understand how these issues happen and what needs to be done. Just an update and an energy from you on the non-gang reduction zones, what I might be able to look forward to as we go forward with the second phase.
Well, thank you for your support. And we, as I said earlier, we submitted to Council yesterday our recommendations for the 3 most recent requests for proposals, of which 12 of those recommendations are for intervention contractors in each one of those 12 target areas. We also, in that transmittal, are recommending 4 agencies and 4 project areas for prevention outside the grid zones, as well as 4 projects, smaller areas of intervention projects outside the grid zones, as well as in research and evaluation. So it's a lot of recommendations you'll be getting. And one of those intervention projects actually is in the Venice area, is what we're bringing forth as a recommendation. It's in a smaller area where there is some pockets there. And we recognize certainly part of our reason for having some resources available for areas outside these target areas is that certainly there are other parts of the city where we have violence. But we do, I just will remind you all, in these 12 targeted areas, they contain about 8% of the people of the city of Los Angeles, but 35% of all of the gang-related violence that occurs in this city happen in those 12 areas. And the mayor's approach has always been to take a comprehensive approach and to try and really alleviate this problem and make progress in these targeted areas to demonstrate that this strategy works, to then build the case for a further investment on the part of the public and the private sector to really expand that out and reach into these other areas where we actually have some problems as well.
And I look forward to your help with us in partnering with the private community. We have to work together with the private sector on this too. When we had the killing on Abbot Kinney, right after the Abbot Kinney Festival, my God, people in Venice got pretty upset about it. So we know in the 11th District that we have issues, and we look forward to your support as we go forward with hoping getting funding for some of our groups that are actually right on the street there doing what I think is critical work.
Well, I'd love to work with you. As you know, last summer, our Summer Night Lights program that I mentioned before, we didn't use 1 penny of public dollars.
Right.
That was all funded with almost $1 million of private money that I raised. And we've committed in our plan this year to double the size of Summer Night Lights and make half of that investment actually come from the private sector. So I'm out there hustling private donations and support every day to try and support this, especially in these tough economic times.
Yeah, and Summer Night Lights, explain that real quickly, what that is.
Summer Night Lights is our effort to target parks and recreation facilities. Actually, this summer we're going to focus on 10 rec and parks facilities, 4 public housing projects, and 1 public school to offer a program in the 2 months of the summer that is the hottest, most violent time of the year, during the 4 nights of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, which is the most violent time of the day. And it's really a very simple thing, is we are actually expanding the programming into hours of operation in those parks from 7 p.m. till midnight, every night, Wednesday through Saturday. Then we hire 10 young people who are at risk of either being victims or perpetrators of violence to be a part of the solution. We pay them for a job for the summer. They participate in doing all the outreach. They actually help operate the program. We train them. And then we actually work with intervention groups to try and negotiate ceasefires and to make the park a safe space for the summer where kids and families from all the community can come and enjoy positive recreational opportunities as opposed to hanging out on the street corner late at night, where they either become potentially a target for some shooting, or if some extracurricular activity starts happening on the street corner, then some of those guys might actually turn into being the perpetrators themselves. We think if we can bring folks into the parks, give them something positively to engage in, we can reduce gang-related violence, and last summer it worked, and we
Just
expect
no
it to work
question.
further.
It's a no-brainer, and thank you for your leadership on that. Appreciate it very much.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. First, I want to thank my colleagues and Councilman Cardenas for his tenacity and his consistency in running his committee the way he does. And at times he's by himself, at times he has maybe 1 or 2 council members. So I want to thank him for his stamina. But I also know, Mr. Carr, that you did a tremendous job. The midnight programs and the focus you've created is tremendous, and I think we're seeing real results from that. But I can't help but think of the juxtaposition of the violent killings that we've had in my district, the children who have died and from stray bullets, and then having the frustration of knowing we have meetings afterwards and maybe 12 or 15 persons show up. In the Cypress Park area, because of that one notorious gang, we maybe had 150, 200 people weeks after the shooting. But 3 months later, we were lucky to have 15. Which begs the question, in your process and perhaps in the process of Mr. Cardenas, chair of his committee, are we yet looking at the possibility of bringing in the parents in a much stronger role in trying to create that sense of information and knowledge in dealing with environments that to them might be foreign? Many of the parents come from other countries. Many of the parents are just learning how the system works. They're not familiar with the educational process, and their kids tend to get lost in that gray area. Can you just speak to that and see if there's any thought to that? Because I know we're building,
Sure.
so we're not asking you to run. We've got to take baby steps first, but let me just hold my time.
Well, one of the risk factors for gang joining is actually a lack of parental oversight, and so particularly on our prevention programs, which is going to be the bulk of 2/3 of the money we're investing is really in prevention programs. One of the mitigating risk factors that you're trying to deal with is a lack of parental oversight or dealing with the family on this issue. And so any of our prevention programs that are working with young people that are most at risk of joining gangs are going to have a significant family component, whether that be parenting or engaging the families in various processes. So that's absolutely something that's built in already to our prevention programs. I think what you get to, though, is something that this issue is very complex. We've put into place some of the framework now that we're going to have to continue to build out over time and over the years. But certainly one of the big, in my opinion, one of the big challenges that we have to address is how do you build social capital in a neighborhood where right now violence in some ways is acceptable. And how do you flip that around and build a social capital where the residents, whether it's parents, it's young people themselves, it's the people that live there, the business owners, all the stakeholders say, this violence is unacceptable in our neighborhood, and we're going to band together to change the culture so we don't transmit the acceptance of that cultural violence to go and be transmitted any further. And that is a much bigger process that's going to require neighborhood councils, the council offices, a lot of stakeholders to really make that happen.
And you started describing what I was going to ask you to describe is, how do you interpret social capital? Because folks who are listening to this conversation right now at home want to understand what does social capital mean. Could you just be a little more specific to that?
I think
Please,
social
Councilman.
capital is when you have people, residents, stakeholders in these neighborhoods who see themselves as having a stake in the neighborhood for making it better, for investment in that. And that's from very big things, small things as to how they maintain their own property, how they do business in that neighborhood, to being involved at their local park and recreation facility, engaging in the local school. I think there's a lot of different things that people can do to be engaged around this issue. Providing safe passages, any number of things. And I think it's all of that comes together is where you sort of have a sense in the neighborhood that there's a lot of people who are involved here that have a stake in this, and if something starts to spiral out of control, the people themselves that live there will say, we're not going to allow that to spiral out of control. And we're not just going to depend on law enforcement to come in and maybe bring law and order. In some cases, in some places at certain times, that's required. But we're not going to just depend on law enforcement only to do that. We're going to engage and band together as people who live in this neighborhood to work together to do that, and often in conjunction with law enforcement as well.
Well, I appreciate that breakdown. Just two more points. One is the jobs factor to me, I'm not going to let go. I've been fighting for 4 or 5 years to get this city to look at the job factor for our youth as a policy and a position that's just as important as having police on the street. The database that you're accruing, could we look at that database so that we can start actually connecting, and this is my wishful thinking, the contracts that the city currently has? And I'm waiting for the day in which the mayor, together with the council, can hold department heads accountable and actually assess their performance based on how many jobs they generate into our city, given our own city tax dollars being used for these contracts. We need to have accountability. Is that a direction you see your programs evolving into?
Well, I would say please don't give up on fighting for jobs for young people and young adults in this city, because we definitely need to make the economic engine that this city has through its own contracting, its own proprietary departments. If we don't figure out how to make that engine, economic engine, work for this population, we'll have a permanent underclass. And we've got to break down, there's a lot of barriers, which is a much longer conversation that we need to have.
Well, but Deputy Frank is there.
Yeah, no, we definitely think that's a key thing. I mean, when you think about, from everything about some of the restrictions around hiring, some of the low literacy levels that we need to help folks overcome, the fact that you have a felony, sometimes just basically you don't even get an interview if you have a felony, which is a substantial hurdle for some folks who have already been incarcerated who might want to make a change in their life. But if you can't get over that particular hurdle, and you can't get a legitimate job, well, you're going to continue to operate in the underground illegal economy. And so I think there's a number of things there about how we do that is really important. We, as you know, want to continue to work with you on that.
I'm hoping the department heads get it. I'm hoping they're understanding that we want to see this concern for jobs be beyond just a public relations good gesture. My last point is that this past weekend, one of my boys, who's 18, taped for me on the History Channel a special on the notorious gang we have in Northeast. I don't want to mention the name because I don't think they need any more notoriety than they feel they deserve. But it spoke to the tragedies that occurred in the mid-90s when a young white little girl was shot on Isabel, and the reaction and the spontaneity and the whole relationship between the drug transaction, that gang, and that neighborhood. What happened in Drew Street recently, what happened in the shooting on Aragon, and what's going on right now in Highland Park. I believe it does the city a disservice to establish that type of fame, if you will, when in fact the city is doing what it can to create parks, bring police stations, new facilities, the program we're working with. When do we start talking about the good things in Los Angeles? When do we start speaking to those who would make this type of production available about how we are being responsive? Because right now, everyone in the world who saw that is saying Los Angeles is sinking in gang infestation and that it's out of control. We're making progress.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that particular special. One of my staff saw that, who actually works for me and lives in that neighborhood. They said, my God, if I didn't live in this neighborhood and I didn't work in our office, I would have been scared to death to ever even drive through there. And she said, I have such a different perspective of what life is like actually living and working there. And so I think you're right, we need to do more to combat that. And I will say, like I try and say everywhere I talk about publicly, I think it's important for us to remember one simple thing, that all across this city, even if the toughest neighborhoods, the neighborhoods where we have some of the most entrenched gang problems, even in those neighborhoods, 85% of the kids that live in those neighborhoods will never join a gang. They're good kids. They may walk a certain way, talk a certain way, look a certain way, but they're not gang-baiting, drug-dealing, gun-toting gang members. And I think it's important to remember that the vast majority of the kids who live in the city are good kids who want the same things that you and I want for our kids. They want to grow up safe, healthy. They want a good job. They want a family, a place to live. And I think sometimes the media and even us as folks, adults in the city, need to remember that most kids are good kids. There's a small, tiny fraction of kids who actually are really involved in some of this problem behavior, and we certainly need to target our resources to try and keep as many of them out of that pathway as possible and get them on the right path. But most kids in this city are good kids.
And I needed to bring it up in closing
Reyes.
just because of the amount of publicity that received, so thank you.
Thank you,
Council President.
Ms. Perry.
I'll call the question, please.
All right, Ms. Perry calls the question. Is there any objection to calling the question? If not, let's go ahead and open the roll then. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That is approved. Thank you. Next order of business.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Those are posted and referred.
There's excuse on the desk. Councilmember Grewal requests to be excused March 10th and 11th for city business. A motion is required.
That takes us down to what?
10.
Okay. I know Mr. Rosendahl and she are going to speak about those days, but for now, I'll go ahead and move that with Ms. Perry. And that excuse is granted.
And that clears the desk.
All right. Any other announcements, colleagues? Ms. Hahn.
I have a joyous announcement to make. My fourth grandchild was born early this morning, and her name's Isabella. And she's the daughter of my son, Mark, and his wife, Jacqueline. She was born happy, healthy, and have to make room for her on the Christmas card this year.
The mother of a mother. How nice.
No, this is Mark.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Any other announcements? Do we have any adjourning motions today? Yes? Okay. If I can ask everybody, please rise for adjourning motions.
You know, my family had kind of a bittersweet. We were very excited about the birth of my granddaughter this morning, but yesterday afternoon, my mom's sister, her only sister, passed away, Jean, at the age of 81, and she was absolutely my favorite aunt growing up, and very, very close to her. So this has kind of been a bittersweet couple of days for our family. But Jean, again, was my mom's younger sister. She passed away yesterday at the age of 81. There were 7 children in the family, and they all grew up in Japan as kids of my grandparents who were missionaries in Japan. So she had, along with my mom, had a very interesting upbringing. But Jean certainly was always full of life, very vivacious, had just a host of friends who loved her. She had a great sense of humor, and certainly was someone that I always looked up to and really wanted to be like. She's survived by her husband, my Uncle Earl, her son Corky, and his wife Mila, her daughter Jackie, who's really my cousin, who's almost like my sister. We grew up together. She's survived by her grandkids, Michelle, Ryan, Teresa, and Michael, and her 6 siblings, one of those of which is my mom. So we will really miss Jean and know that she lived just a great life and has left a lot of love behind her.
And we give our colleague our condolences for the loss of her aunt.
Absolutely.
Very sorry to hear that.
We're very sorry. We'll put all members on that. Ms. Hahn. Are there adjourning motions, colleagues? If not, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.